Hey, I'm back to do a little update video and talk about why I'm starting a podcast. I know this video won't go out to very many people unless you're really following me close, so I may not even keep this video up for very long, but it's just to talk a little bit about why I'm branching into this new venue and what I'm planning to do with it. So I love podcasts. I actually listened to podcasts way before I started watching YouTube or looking on YouTube for information about breast cancer myself. I find that podcasts are much more relatable and natural in their flow. Like, I think that YouTube uses algorithms that are not very natural and very based on topics rather than on relationships. And so I feel like with a podcast, I know I'm not going to miss an episode, and I'm going to hear it in chronological order. A lot of my viewers here on YouTube are upset because they don't naturally get fed or find my videos in order or even by topic, and they're confused about how to access different videos. And actually, I just recently made playlists for that reason. I made playlists that are more chronological by year. And if you listen to or watch my playlist by year, so if you go to 2021 or 2022 or 2023, it will play from the beginning of the year to the end of the year in chronological order. So if you're frustrated about that, that is one way to figure out how to do it. And I thank you if you're that interested in my videos. That is really honoring, and really grateful for your attention and your interest. But podcasts naturally do that. So you can go back to episode 1, and depending on how you have your player set and what player you're using, it will play everything chronologically from beginning all the way up to the present day, and then it will keep you updated by automatically downloading the next episode as it comes out. And I love that because that's how I work. That's how I want my relationship with episodes to be and work. I don't want to have to wonder if I missed one somewhere along the way. So I feel like it has more of a natural flow. And in terms of ads also, I think that I may use ads with my podcast because I will want to find ways for it to continue to be, affordable for me to do. I want to be able to pay for the different subscriptions and editing services that I use, just like I do here with YouTube ads. But I think the ads in a podcast can be much more, easy to stick in and change and adapt to what I need, and also easy to choose because the ads that are put on my YouTube videos are not my favorite ads, and I don't get to choose them. So that's kind of frustrating sometimes. Another major reason that I'm doing a podcast is I want to start interviewing guests and not just talk about myself all the time, which is so exciting for me because I love hearing the stories of other people. And I love providing that to listeners and viewers here as well. But not every guest is going to want to be on video. Not everyone loves the idea of seeing themselves on screen and putting themselves out there like that. So audio is a much more welcoming and inviting way to have guests join me, and a little bit more approachable in many cases because my podcast is going to be about just normal people. It's not going to be about experts, at least in the first season. I probably will have a season later on that interviews experts like surgeons and oncologists and small business owners and people that serve the breast cancer community. But for my first season or two, I really want to talk to just average people because I think that the average kind of story around breast cancer is what most of us are really looking to hear. For myself, my favorite podcast for the last couple of years has been The Burn, which is put out by Wildfire Magazine, which is a magazine for youngish survivors of breast cancer, for those that have been diagnosed under the age of 50. So I barely made that cut myself, and yet I feel so drawn to that podcast and that magazine. My husband just bought me a subscription, so I get the print magazine in the mail every couple months also. But it's just a magazine where people tell their biographical stories of a certain chapter of their breast cancer experience. And that experience of reading and hearing the writers who've written their stories talk on the Burn podcast has been the most healing way that I've dealt with being a survivor and coped with being a survivor of breast cancer. And so I just want to provide more of that. Maybe in the older communities as well, so people over 50, but not necessarily. Probably half of my guests will be under 50 and half of them will be over 50. Because I am 51 myself, I'm just generally going to be meeting people around my age, and that's probably the biggest group of breast cancer survivors are people that are my age or a little bit older. So I don't want to be limited to a certain age group, but I definitely want to rise to the level of beauty and camaraderie that is found on the Burn podcast. And if you haven't found that yet, that would be something to check out for sure, if you're a podcast listener. The cool thing about doing a podcast these days is I can also do it here on YouTube. They have a podcast section for my channel. And it may mean that I change the name of my channel, because my podcast is going to be called A Breast Cancer Diary. It's going to have the same name as my Instagram account, where I've been vlogging for the last 3 years. Since before my first mastectomy, I was doing a daily diary entry by vlog on Instagram. And I kind of just want to continue that diary and tell other people's stories with it instead of telling my own, since I've kind of stopped doing a daily vlog. I definitely have stopped doing a daily vlog. I do more like a weekly vlog on that channel now, or on that Instagram account. But I'll probably use that Instagram account to talk about just little clips about what's coming up on my podcast from now on, since they'll have the same name. Some of my other favorite podcasts have been, there's one called Breast Cancer Stories, and that's the one that kind of inspired me to tell my story in real time, because it is a podcast that tells 2 different women's stories in real time. They're interviewing the women every week as they go into their different stages of active treatment and mastectomy or lumpectomy. One of my other favorite podcasts, which is very wide in its breadth and depth, is called Breast Cancer Conversations, and it is put on by an organization called Surviving Breast Cancer. And that's a really good one if you're interested in hearing stories in a really informal way as well. That podcast is not very polished. Sometimes they're just sharing a webinar conversation that people are having on Zoom. It's been recorded and they put it up as a podcast. So it's not very polished, not very well edited if you're interested in podcasts that are well edited. Mine probably won't be super polished either. It's not going to have a lot of special effects or music or anything like that. Another favorite podcast of mine that is no longer, a couple of them that are no longer going, there's one called Breast Friends, and that's how I found a lot of the resources that I use today, because she interviewed a lot of small business owners and nonprofit owners, and people like April Stearns, who started The Burn and Wildfire magazine. So it's a good one for discovering resources. And then Our Killer Life is one that was a very short-lived podcast, but I really liked that one too. It was based out of Seattle and mostly did interviews with guests, but there were a couple of episodes where she just told her own story in different ways and with her boyfriend or partner. And so that one was really good too. So there's just a few podcasts about breast cancer and the breast cancer experience, and I feel like there could be so many more. And so I want to contribute and add one more to that list in my own special way. I live on the fringes of breast cancer norms. I don't have reconstruction because I'm not interested in prosthetics and reconstruction and all of the surgeries that are involved in that. I'm a nutritionist. I'm a natural girl, and I'm not going to be signing up for multiple surgeries. So there won't be that aspect in my podcast. And then I also have lobular breast cancer, and that's a very fringe kind of topic, although, you know, lobular survivors are more numerous than ovarian cancer survivors. So there's a huge part of the population represented by lobular cancer. Unfortunately, probably most of them still don't even know that that's the type of breast cancer that they had, because most surgeons and oncologists don't pay any attention to the differences between ductal and lobular. So lobular awareness has a long way to go, and I'm a big advocate and activist on behalf of lobular awareness in my personal life, and that will probably come through in the podcast as well. I will have a lot of guests that will have been diagnosed with lobular and who may have been lobular activists or advocates, or are becoming advocates of lobular visibility and awareness, because that's just the kind of work that I do as a mentor and an advocate. I'm working with those women a lot in my personal life. So maybe not as mainstream as other breast cancer podcasts will have been, but there's definitely a place for these kinds of discussions and topics. And mostly I just want to tell stories about the decisions that we make, the hard decisions that we make as we're going through our diagnosis and treatment options. And maybe talking about some of the less conventional choices and decisions that people have made too, just to take the stigma away from them and the fear away and open our minds to some of the different ways that people have experienced treatment and surgeries. So one of the ways that I'm going to invite you to be a part of my podcast plan and launch is that I'm going to probably be posting my podcast episodes, the first few anyway, as videos. And as much as I'm able to, I will try to get my guests to be on video so that I can share them here. And I would love to get your advice and input and feedback from those first few, especially as I'm launching or pre-launching, to see how they're hitting you, how they could have been made better, what questions I could have asked or focused on, and also the length of the interview, because it will be a little longer than my typical video is here on YouTube. I hope to make as many of my podcast episodes available on video here on YouTube, and I'm not sure how you feel about that. And so as my more loyal following here on YouTube, I would love to hear how that hits you as they start to roll out. And if you would rather have me keep them separate, maybe on a separate channel, or if that makes any difference to you at all. I imagine for most people it doesn't probably make a big difference. But that will probably also influence whether I change the name of this channel to match. If I am going to be putting my podcast videos on here, then I probably will change the name of the channel to match the podcast. Otherwise, it'll be really confusing for people to have me come on screen and say, this is a breast cancer diary podcast, when really it says Estrogen Diaries up at the top of the YouTube page. So if I do a separate podcast YouTube channel, then that will definitely be named A Breast Cancer Diary, just in case you're interested in staying tuned and finding that when it does arrive. Probably will start arriving in June. I had hoped to launch in May for Women's Health Month, but it's probably going to be closer to June and throughout the summer that I have my first season. And then I'll take a break in the fall for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, because I have so many events with the Flat community that I'll be doing in person on that month. I won't be able to do a lot of podcast recordings at that time. So that's kind of my seasonal schedule, or at least how I plan for it to look. And I just would love to hear your input and feedback, and whether or not this is something that interests you as a viewer. So be sure to leave comments below on this one. And this video, again, may not be around forever, because it's more of a temporary topic and only going to be applicable this year. So I will take this video down after a little while, but would really appreciate your input and your ideas. What would you like to hear from me about, and who would you like for me to interview? Do you have someone that you've heard interviewed on another channel that you would really like to hear more from? Let me know, and I will put those people on my list. And thanks so much for that. And I'll see you in my next video. Take care.